The courtroom was cold, but my face burned as the tears came. I hadn't meant to cry, not there, not in front of him, but my ex's voice was so calm, so smug, as he told the judge I was unstable and over-emotional. Mark, my Mark, who once whispered promises of forever into the curve of my neck, now stood across the polished wood, his expensive suit a stark contrast to my own carefully chosen, but undeniably worn, navy dress. He even smirked when I broke, a tiny, almost imperceptible lift at the corner of his mouth, but I saw it. It was a smirk that said, "See? I told you so." He'd already won. I couldn't speak through the shame, the words catching in my throat like jagged stones. My own lawyer, Ms. Albright, a kind woman with tired eyes, placed a gentle hand on my arm, a silent offering of support, but it felt miles away. The judge, a stern-faced woman with graying hair pulled back severely, looked down at me over her spectacles, her expression unreadable but leaning, I feared, towards agreement with Mark. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. This was it. This was how I lost her. But just as the judge looked ready to rule, a small sound pierced the heavy silence. A scrape of a shoe, the rustle of fabric. Our daughter, Lily, all of 8 years old, was standing up from the wooden bench in the gallery where she'd been sitting so quietly, her small form almost swallowed by the imposing grandeur of the room. Her brown hair, the same shade as mine, was neatly plaited, and she clutched the straps of her unicorn-themed backpack, the one I'd bought her for the start of 2nd grade, her knuckles white. Her gaze, wide and serious, was fixed not on me, nor on Mark, but on the judge. My breath hitched. No, Lily, please. Sit down. Don't make this worse. My panic amplified, a fresh wave of nausea rolling through me. What could she possibly do? She took a small, hesitant step forward, then another. The bailiff, a burly man who had mostly looked bored, straightened slightly, his eyes narrowed. Mark turned, his smugness faltering for a fraction of a second, replaced by a flicker of annoyance? Or was it something else? He opened his mouth as if to speak, to stop her, but Lily was already moving. She reached into her backpack, her small fingers fumbling with the zipper, the sound unnaturally loud in the tense quiet. Then, she pulled out something that made everyone in that courtroom stop breathing. It wasn't a drawing, though her backpack was usually full of them, vibrant, chaotic explosions of color. It wasn't a favorite stuffed animal peeking out for comfort. It was a book. A slim, worn, spiral-bound notebook with a faded kitten sticker on the cover. Her journal. The one she'd started keeping a few months ago, meticulously writing in it every night before bed, sometimes with my help sounding out the harder words, sometimes entirely on her own, her brow furrowed in concentration. My heart plummeted. Oh, God! What had she written? What childish observations, what innocent misinterpretations would Mark twist to his advantage? I remembered the day she got it. It was a Tuesday, I think. I'd come home late from my evening shift at the library, the scent of old paper and floor wax still clinging to my clothes. The small apartment we shared, a 2-bedroom walk-up that always seemed to smell faintly of the downstairs bakery's cinnamon rolls in the morning and stale cooking oil by evening, was quiet. Lily was supposed to be asleep. Mark had dropped her off hours ago, his usual curt nod my only greeting. He never came inside anymore, not since things had gotten truly bad. I found her not in her bed, but curled up on the threadbare armchair in the living room, the one with the permanent imprint of countless bedtime stories. Her little legs were tucked beneath her, and she was staring out the window at the flickering neon sign of the laundromat across the street. The soft glow illuminated the tear tracks on her cheeks. "Sweet pea? What's wrong?" I'd asked, my own exhaustion momentarily forgotten. I knelt beside her, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. It felt damp. She didn't look at me, just kept her gaze fixed on the blinking sign. Daddy said you're sad all the time because of me. The words were a punch to the gut. I closed my eyes, fighting back my own tears. How could he? How could he poison her like this? Oh, Lily, no. That's not true. Not at all. He said you cry when I'm not looking. And I did. Sometimes. The weight of it all, the separation, the mounting bills, the fear of this very courtroom battle, it would press down on me in the quiet hours, after she was asleep, and the tears would fall. But never because of her. She was the reason I kept going. Mommy cries sometimes because grown-up things are hard, baby. But you're my sunshine. You make everything better. I pulled her into my arms, her small body trembling against mine. That night, I'd given her the notebook, a leftover from a library donation. Maybe you can write down your feelings, I'd suggested. Or draw them. Sometimes it helps get them out. She'd taken it with a solemn nod, her eyes still shadowed. From then on, it became her constant companion. Now, in the glacial silence of the courtroom, Lily walked with that same solemn determination towards the judge's dais. The bailiff took a step, then hesitated, looking to the judge for guidance. Judge Harrison watched Lily, her expression unreadable but no longer stern. Intrigued, perhaps. Mark finally spoke, his voice tight. Your Honor, this is hardly appropriate. She's a child. She doesn't understand. But the judge held up a hand, silencing him. Her gaze remained on my daughter. Lily reached the side of the dais, too short to see over it properly. She held up the notebook. For you, she said, her voice small but clear, echoing slightly in the hushed room. The bailiff moved then, taking the notebook from her outstretched hand and passing it up to Judge Harrison. My own lawyer, Ms. Albright, looked as stunned as I felt. I could only watch, my body frozen, my mind a whirlwind of fear and a strange, fierce pride. The judge opened the kitten-covered journal. She turned a page, then another. Her expression, previously so guarded, softened almost imperceptibly. She paused on one page for a long moment. What was she seeing? My mind raced. Was it the entry about the school play, where Lily had written, "Mommy clapped the loudest even though I only had one line"? Or the one about the time I burnt the pancakes and we ended up eating cereal for dinner, laughing until our stomachs hurt? Mommy said sometimes mistakes are funny, she'd painstakingly printed. I remembered another night, just a few weeks ago. Mark had called, his voice a low, menacing hum on the other end of the line. I'd taken the phone into my bedroom, closing the door, but the walls in our apartment were thin. I tried to keep my voice down, but his escalated, accusations flying like poison darts. You're unfit, Sarah. You can't even manage your own life, let alone hers. She'll be better off with me, in a stable home. When I finally hung up, shaking, I found Lily standing in my doorway, her teddy bear clutched to her chest, her eyes wide with a worry no child should ever have to carry. She hadn't said anything, just crawled into bed with me, her small hand finding mine in the dark. We lay there for a long time, the silence punctuated only by the distant wail of a siren and the frantic thumping of my own heart. Later, I saw her writing in her journal, her little brow furrowed. I hadn't asked what she wrote. I was too afraid to know what she was internalizing. In the courtroom, Judge Harrison continued to read. I chanced a glance at Mark. His confident facade was cracking. A muscle twitched in his jaw. His lawyer leaned in, whispering something, but Mark just shook his head, his eyes fixed on the judge, on Lily's journal. He knew what Lily was like. Quiet, yes. Observant, fiercely so. And honest, to a fault. She didn't possess the guile for manipulation, only the simple, unvarnished truth of a child's perspective. What could possibly be in that journal to make a difference? Mark had presented such a convincing case, painting me as emotionally volatile, financially unstable, a mess of a woman barely holding it together. And some of it, I had to admit, felt true. There were days I was a mess, days the grief and the stress threatened to swallow me whole. He'd meticulously documented every late bill, conveniently forgetting his own inconsistent support payments. Every time I'd been tearful during fraught handovers, ignoring the goading remarks he'd make just before. Every instance I'd had to rely on my sister for childcare when my shifts ran late. He'd twisted my struggles into proof of my incompetence, my vulnerability into instability. His lawyer had cross-examined me with surgical precision, her questions designed to make me stumble, to make me cry, and I had. Just as Mark had predicted. I'd felt myself unraveling on the stand, the carefully constructed composure I'd tried to maintain crumbling under the weight of his accusations and the lawyer's relentless probing. The judge turned another page. I saw a drawing, a stick figure me with a wobbly smile, holding hands with a smaller stick figure Lily under a bright yellow sun. Simple, childlike. But there was something in the way the figures were drawn, so close together, surrounded by hearts. Then, the judge stopped. She read one entry, her lips moving silently. She read it again. She looked up, first at Lily, who stood watching her, small and resolute, her hands now clasped behind her back. Then she looked at Mark, a long, considering look. Finally, her gaze met mine. There was no pity in it, but something else. Understanding? Perhaps. I thought of the endless nights Lily and I had spent huddled together on our worn sofa, sharing a bowl of popcorn and watching old movies because the cable had been cut off. The way her small hand would instinctively find mine when a scene was sad or scary. The times she'd hum softly to herself while I paid bills at the kitchen table, the numbers swimming before my tired eyes, her quiet presence a balm to my frayed nerves. She'd seen me at my worst, yes. She'd seen the tears, the worry lines etched on my face. But she'd also seen me get up every morning, plaster on a brave face, and fight for us. She'd seen me read her bedtime stories even when my voice was hoarse with exhaustion. She'd seen me help her with her homework, pack her lunches with little notes, kiss her scraped knees, and hold her when she had nightmares. Mark's lawyer started to object again. Your Honor, with all due respect, this is irregular. The writings of a child. I'm aware of the irregularity, Counselor, Judge Harrison said, her voice firm, cutting through the lawyer's objection. She closed the journal gently, keeping her finger in it to mark a page. She looked at Lily. Thank you, young lady. You may sit down. Lily gave a small nod and walked back to the bench, her steps a little less hesitant now. She sat down, tucking her backpack beside her, and looked at me. She offered a small, tentative smile. A wave of love so fierce it almost buckled my knees washed over me. My brave, brave girl. Judge Harrison cleared her throat. The courtroom was utterly silent, save for the frantic beat of my own heart. Mr. Peterson, she said, addressing Mark, her tone markedly cooler than before. You've painted a picture of Ms. Evans as an unstable and overly emotional mother, incapable of providing a consistent and nurturing environment for your daughter. Mark inclined his head, a shadow of his earlier confidence returning. Yes, Your Honor. It is with a heavy heart that I say so, but it's the truth. The judge said. She opened the journal again to the marked page. Lily, in an entry dated 3 weeks ago, writes the following. She paused, then read, her voice clear and steady. Daddy came to get me. He told Mommy she was a bad mom and nobody liked her. Mommy cried. I held her hand. Mommy is not bad. Mommy is my best friend. She makes me feel safe. Daddy makes my tummy hurt. The words hung in the air, simple, direct, and devastating. Mark's face went pale. Truly pale. The smirk was long gone, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief, then a flush of anger that crept up his neck. He started to speak, to protest, but the judge silenced him with a look. She goes on, Judge Harrison continued, her voice unwavering, in several entries, to describe her anxieties before and after visits with you, Mr. Peterson. She details instances where you have spoken derogatorily about her mother, in her presence. She also, however, details numerous instances of everyday life with her mother, reading books, doing homework, baking cookies, even, and I quote, "Mommy singing bad but loud in the car and we laughed." A ghost of a smile touched the judge's lips. She looked directly at Mark. While this journal is not, in a formal sense, evidence to be cross-examined, it is a profound and contemporaneous record of a child's experiences and emotional state. It speaks volumes about where she feels secure, loved, and, frankly, where she feels anxiety and distress. The judge closed the journal. I believe I have heard enough to reconsider the narrative presented here today. This court will take a recess to review all testimony and this additional perspective. We will reconvene at 2 o'clock to deliver my ruling on the interim custody arrangement. She banged her gavel, the sound final. Miss Albright squeezed my arm, her eyes shining. "Sarah," she whispered, "that was remarkable." I couldn't speak. I just looked at Lily, my daughter, my small, quiet, observant daughter who had found a way to speak her truth when I could not, who had, with the simple honesty of a child, cut through layers of manipulation and deceit. Mark was already striding out of the courtroom, his lawyer hurrying after him, their faces grim. He didn't look back. The bailiff handed the journal back to Lily as we stood to leave. She clutched it to her chest. I reached for her hand, my own still trembling, but not from fear anymore. From relief, from awe. Her small fingers curled around mine, warm and sure. We walked out of the heavy oak doors into the echoing hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. We didn't speak. There were no words for what had just happened, for the immense weight that had, if not lifted entirely, at least shifted. We just walked, hand in hand, towards the main exit, the sounds of the courthouse fading behind us. Outside, the city air felt fresh, despite the traffic fumes. The sun, surprisingly bright after the dimness of the courtroom, made me blink. We stood on the steps for a moment, just breathing. Lily leaned her head against my arm. The courtroom was cold, but this time, I didn't feel alone. I had my daughter, my brave little girl, whose quiet strength had spoken louder than all the angry words and carefully constructed lies. We still had a fight ahead of us, I knew that. But looking down at Lily, at the determined set of her small chin, I also knew we would face it together. And, for the first time in a very long time, I felt a flicker of hope, small but persistent, like the first crocus pushing through the frozen earth of winter. Whatever came next, we had each other. And that, I realized, was everything.